tetany here because it's not going to be able to relax at all. That's tetany. And what is your skeletal muscle going to do next? Fatigue. So that it's like going to drop the weight. You can't do it anymore. If you went out and ran and you said, oh, I can do it a little bit more, your heart muscle starts doing this. What is your heart muscle going to do? Fatigue. And when your heart muscle fatigues, what does it do? It stops. The reason that your skeletal muscle can fatigue is because it only has 2 milliseconds to rest. And it's going this over and over and over, and it's fatiguing. It's like tired. Whenever you allow that 200 milliseconds for your cardiac muscle cells, they should not fatigue. And that's one of the characteristics of, for your heart, so that you don't just like have a heart that stops all the time.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right.
So the reason I'm going over 2 milliseconds and 200 milliseconds is to tell you that calcium slows down this contraction, allowing 200 milliseconds per contraction, and that is going to prevent fatigue of your cardiac muscle cell.
And that's a refractory period.
The refractory period is where you cannot have another action potential during that refractory period. Okay, so what ion is responsible for not letting cardiac muscle fatigue? Calcium, because calcium moves so slowly. Okay, I am fully aware that students hear this depolarization, repolarization, action potential stuff, and you put it in your mind in AMP1 and you like to forget about it. It comes back in this chapter. And in our water balance chapter, we talk about what happens if you have too much sodium, what happens if you have too little sodium. Potassium, the same thing, and calcium. So whenever you get into the nursing program, you're expected to know what happens whenever you have too much sodium. Like you're just supposed to know it because you learned it in this class. And that is one of the subjects that people don't like to read about. Okay, so does everybody see your action potential? And your action potential is going to cause that electrical signal, right? Okay, so here is the measurement of the electrical signal, and that is called the what? ECG, correct?
The measurement, ECG is the measurement?
ECG is the measurement of the electrical signal of the heart. The electrical signal of the heart. Measured in your ECG. Okay, so let's label all of our waves here on our heart. First of all, we have our P wave. Everybody see that? Your P wave is going to be will be caused by depolarization of the atria. Depolarization of the atria is going to cause that P wave. Your QRS complex is caused by depolarization of the ventricles.
QRS complex?
QRS complex, right there. What does that mean? Well, no, let's go back. T wave. T wave is going to be what? Repolarization. Repolarization of the ventricles. Good. Repolarization of the ventricles. Okay, I have it on the graph over there, labeled depolarized and repolarization. I don't know why I wrote depolarized instead of depolarization. Right? Okay, this is like, this, you're supposed to be able to put this with that. Okay, what actually happens in the P wave? You know it's depolarization of the atria? The fourth grade way to say that would be what?
The atria are told to contract.
The atria are told to contract. Good. The atria are told to contract.
I like the fourth grade.
Okay. I know, I do too. That's what I'm saying. So the atria are told to contract. How are they told to contract? Remember that SA node depolarized? Okay, so that's depolarization of the atria when the SA node depolarizes. Makes sense? Okay, here we have Depolarization of the ventricle. What would be the fourth grade definition of that?
The ventricles are told to contract.
Ventricles are told to contract. Good. The ventricles are told to contract. What part of your heart is going to have to do with depolarization of the ventricles? The AV node, the bundle of His, the right and left bundle branches, and the Purkinje fibers, right? Okay, because all of that has to do with telling the ventricles to contract. So you see how much bigger of a wave it is, and that's why it's going to have a larger part of the heart. And then you have repolarization of the ventricles. What would that be? Ventricles?
Are told to relax.
Ventricles are told to relax. Good.
So on the QRS complex, does the ventricle start to contract right when it gets to the
Actually,
AV
we're going to be
node, or
talking
does
about.
it has to go all the way through the Purkinje fiber?
It goes all the way to the Purkinje fibers, but that electrical signal can start being recorded here at the Q. And whenever we look at this next week, whenever we're going to see, this is where it's told, and I always use the example of you tell your children to go clean their room, and they don't clean their room while you're telling them to do it, right? They might not clean it at all, but they have to like go to the room to do it. So here, this is the atria are starting to be told to contract, but they really don't start that contraction until about right here. So that is next week with our cardiac cycle. I mean, I'm starting the cardiac cycle now, but putting all of this together is next week.
Okay.
I got a question. It's stupid.
Yes.
Where you have at the bottom where the purple is, it says depolarization of the ventricle. Is that the QRS complex?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if you look at this, the atria are told to contract, the ventricles are told to contract, the ventricles are told to relax. What's left off?
The atria is told to relax.
Atria are told to relax, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
That's our fourth grade definition. What's our real word for it? We have depolarization, atria told to contract. What was the other? Repolarization. Repolarization
That's hidden in the QRS.
of the atria. Mm-hmm. It's a small curve, so it's hidden in that QRS complex.
So that's in the Q part?
It's in the QRS part.
QRS.
In the QRS part.
The atria is a small curve and is hidden. I was going to say it's very weak, but that's the reason it's a small curve. It's hidden in the QRS complex.
So basically, while all this is doing it, the atria are relaxing. That's why it's not really. It's a
The
small part
atria
of
start relaxing here, they relax the whole time here until they're told to contract again.
Okay.